Hello, everyone. My name is Flighty, and I'm here to talk about Megmillan because what else? The reason why I'm making this video is actually because I'm having sort of a celebration. On September 23rd, hopefully the day of this video's upload, it is the official first year anniversary of There Is a Reason, my first and longest work in progress Megmillan fic. Technically, I've been working on it longer than that, but that was the day I uploaded the first 5 chapters to AO3. Anyway, I want to talk about writing Megmillan. It's very fitting to the occasion. It's also going to cover a few points that we discussed in my Megmillan podcast, so go and watch that if you'd like. Take what I have to say about this with a grain of salt, though. Some people out there have been writing Megmillan for way longer than I have, and they're probably way more educated about the ship too. But I'll try my best to cover as many of the details and points as I can, mostly from my experiences as a Megmillan writer. Well, let's begin. Topic number 1. The dynamic. I think probably the most exciting part of writing any ship is figuring out the dynamic of the characters and how it translates into your story. Obviously, this is much easier with canon ships that have a lot of writing already done to them, but it becomes a little more difficult with ships that aren't in a relationship in canon, and even harder when those characters are left very open to interpretation. If you don't know what I'm talking about, a sometimes frustrating but very opportunistic feature of Dead by Daylight's lore and characters is how little we actually know about them. Sure, we're told their backstories, motives, and morals, and maybe we can conclude a lot about their character from what we have, but they aren't from books, and a lot of it is still up to interpretation. The puzzle pieces are there for us to put together, as obviously the lore writers have an idea of who the characters are, but everyone will end up interpreting the lore in different ways because nothing is set into stone. Fanfic writers take that to an extreme when using these characters in pieces of fiction. They have to decide how characters talk, how they interact with others, how they react in certain situations, and how they see the world around them. It's fun, and a lot of it is just the writer's own headcanons, but it could also be really hard to imagine what the character might do. So take that and add on the challenge of making 2 characters who would never realistically have a connection enter a relationship. That's shipping in a nutshell. Of course, it is possible. Sometimes challenging, sometimes easy. It really boils down to outlining the prominent parts of the personalities, motives, morals, and backstories of each character, and then drawing connections between that. Meg and Evan went through that exact process when I started writing them. I wanted to capture the relationship in a genuine and believable way. Not that you need to, it is fiction after all, to really hit home at the feelings of my readers, and for a bit of challenge of course. But dynamic comes in multiple forms. It could be 2 similarities in their personalities or 2 very opposing ones. And There Is a Reason, which, yes, I probably will be referring to a lot, I really want to emphasize the differences between Meg and Evan, too. Differences that usually end up complementing each other, like opposing colors on a color wheel. Evan is usually composed and sensible, while Meg is everywhere and rash, something that ends up actually working nicely as a dynamic. She's normally loud and he's usually quiet, but while Evan gets louder when he's upset, Meg gets quieter. In writing, this is called a foil. And while good stories can work without them, I find that when writing romance, these contrasts really bring the story together. But, like I said, for every difference you need a similarity. Very opposite characters work, and characters with similarities often are much easier to see the spark between. You could draw a lot of lines between Evan and Meg. For one, I wrote them both as being stubborn and hard-headed, a very common trait I see both of them sharing in writing. It's something they have in common, but also potential conflict, which, as avid readers know, is a perfect setup for building their spark. You could also draw a line between their backstories, which is another extremely easy way to grow their bond. They both love their parents, even if one relationship was healthier than the other, and both of them sacrificed everything for it. Meg, her dreams of getting into college and running, and Evan, his artwork, his freedom, and his sanity. You could imagine that they'd be scared to open themselves up to loving and losing again, but once they discover that their love for each other couldn't have been avoided, they suddenly are willing to sacrifice it all again. In the end, it doesn't really matter how you decide to link together these 2 characters. Whether their relationship is built gradually upon similarities and differences, or introduced quickly with traumatic, or passionate, events. What's really going to seal your writing of these characters are the small things. Maybe Evan only speaks softly to her, or maybe Meg only lets her guard down around him. Maybe he instinctively reaches out to touch her when surprised, or she laughs every time he makes a joke. I've seen so many interpretations written into their dynamic, and I love every single one. Part 2. The story. Not every fanfic has to have a plot. A lot of fics don't, and they instead focus solely on the relationship or the events that are currently happening. See, shorter one-chapter fanfics that usually comprise of some interaction between Meg and Evan, whether it's sad, fluffy, or downright smutty, don't need a story of their own. However, when I do see plot in Megmillan fanfics, it is usually split into one of these 3 different categories. Number 1, inside the trials. Number 2, outside of the trials. And number 3, alternate universe. When the relationship between Meg and Evan is written inside of the trials, the writing tends to be dark and emotional, highlighting the pain that the trials brings to both of them and how their opposing roles bring uneasiness and conflict in the start of their romance. The way their budding relationship is written in these fics is so good, and it usually focuses more on building the characteristics of their relationship instead of the characters, which makes sense since we know them already. Fanfiction that takes place outside of the trials, mostly post-entity fics, tend to be happier, though not by much. Domestic fics focus more on the happier aspects of their lives, describing their love and affection with soft and sweet writing. The more action or adventure type fics, such as Breath of Life, go read it now, typically cover darker topics or mixing in more lighthearted stories that are a refreshing breath of air after the breathtaking suspense or heart-wrenching angst. Alternate universes take place in worlds that could be very different from the widely accepted canon, even more so than most fics are. These worlds could take place in completely different eras, switch around parts of the timeline, or change integral aspects of a character's lore. These are so much fun to read, and the moods are all over the place. Sweet and fluffy, moody and angsty, or emotional and dark. I love them all. Each of these things carry with them unique opportunities for background and information building. What I mean by that is, the writer has so many options to build that romance, to share with the reader a look into the love and companionship between these 2 characters. We already know that Meg and Evan are in love, but writers go above and beyond by using words to show why. That's the fun part. After that, we could expand upon the best parts of writing a relationship. The lovey-dovey, super sweet, fluffy, smutty, you get the idea. And don't forget the drama and the near-death experiences. What is fanfiction without it? Just kidding. As simple or as complicated as fanfiction can get, the beautiful part about writing these kinds of characters is that we've already been told their story. We know who they are and what they look like, and so do the readers. Really, all the writers have to do is write the relationship, which, as I'll say a million times more, is the most exciting part. Number 3. Interpretations. If you know me at all, you know that my favorite reason for obsessing over the world of Dead by Daylight and the characters written into the lore is the fact that all of them are so open to interpretation, which might seem scary as an inexperienced writer, but easily becomes your favorite part of using these characters in your stories. If you aren't sure what I mean, I'll explain. So, we have lore for each of the DVD killers and survivors. Some even have tomes or more than one tome. The lore in DVD is great. It tells you the backstory and the motives of each of the characters, while also providing some insight into who they are as a person. But that's all we have. So much still of their personalities, their relationships, and their lives has been left unknown. That's where we all come in. Whether or not you're a writer, you're going to have your own interpretations of these characters. Many writers take it a step further. When writing, they have to fill in certain gaps that the lore doesn't fill for them. For example, we don't know if Meg has ever been in a romantic relationship before. It's up to us to decide all of those details, and so much more when it becomes relative to our plots. Then, there's the fun details. Ones that might not be so relevant to the plot, but might just be added for fun, or because that's how we view the character. These are interpretations, and not a single one of them is wrong. We're all going to have different interpretations of these characters, and maybe even similar ones. This is what I love about DVD fanfiction, both when writing it and when reading it. The same goes for different interpretations of Megmillan. You might read one fic where the relationship is sweet and pure, while others might write them with a lot of conflict and repressed emotions. Some people see them as affectionate and loving, while others see them as having a different love language and touch or praise. Not that I'd ever get bored of Megmillan, but it makes each story about them unique and special. Of course, don't forget about their individual interpretations. It ties into the dynamic, but also makes the relationships with the other characters interesting too. Part 4. Tones. Is your Megmillan fanfic soft and fluffy? Or is it perhaps dark and smutty? Or is it even lighthearted and comedic? Think of writing tones like the emotions that you want to make your reader feel. Do you want to make them cry? Then use tragedy or other dark topics. Do you want to make them squeal with joy? Then rot their teeth out with the sweetest, most wholesome fluff you could ever imagine. Tones are kind of like the mood that you set with your writing. Some stories, particularly longer ones, can have multiple tones. The important part is that the writer sets them, even if they don't mean to or not. Tones can often dictate a lot of things about your stories. Sometimes they can even influence how people interpret your writing. Darker, more serious tones can lead people to assume darker things. Lighter, more playful tones can lead to lighter interpretations. And, of course, they set the mood. About ready to kill off a character? Heavy and stormy is your way to go. Are Meg and Evan about to profess their love? Happy and sunny tones work wonders. Alternatively, you can do the exact opposite. Is the scene light and fun? Are the characters joking and having a good time? Boom! Kill off a character. It will leave a huge impact, but be careful. Too much of a sudden change in tone can feel unnatural. But just imagine dark and sad scenes in movies, where the characters suddenly admit that they have feelings for each other in the middle of death and suffering. I mean, who doesn't like that? In reality, tones are usually used to make the reader feel a certain way. As you write more and more, you'll get better at conveying this tone and applying it to your writing. Tense moments tend to have chunks of short, loose, and non-descriptive actions or trains of thought. More serene and calm moments tend to have longer sentences and paragraphs, as if the character actually has the time to think about their situation and surroundings. Now, why am I telling you all this? Because you might notice it in Megmillan stories. Having a fitting tone really makes readers grow more invested in the story, so if you know of any fanfics that have left you feeling emotional, that's probably why. Megmillan is a ship connected to death, suffering, blood, and pain. Meg and Evan have been through so much, so a lot of the tones in these fanfics tend to get dark. But the dark tones are enjoyable. We get to watch as these two characters find solace in each other and learn together what it means to be happy and safe. Finding love in a place where it usually doesn't exist, that's what I love about ships and what I love about Megmillan. Regardless of how you write them, how you interpret them, how you write their story and the relationship, or how different the tones of your story in the next might be, Megmillan is a beautiful thing. They have so many different themes, complications, and similarities that both the writer and the reader can explore. No matter how you view Megmillan, no matter if you want to see them suffer or thrive, we all have one thing in common. We want to see them together, because, in a way, we all find beauty in their dynamic. Or pain. But enough of me. Go and enjoy a Megmillan fic, or even go and write one. We're only a small shipping community for a game that's been around for only 6 years. Go and take in all the content, or create some yourself. Each and every person has a different idea and interpretation of Megmillan, and it's always fun to see it. I'm just an old writer who's been around fandoms long enough to notice some things about this particular ship. You don't have to listen to me. Anyway, thanks for watching. If you haven't before, go ahead and check out Archive of Our Own, or what it's usually called, AO3. Use the tag system to search out Meg and Evan under the Relationships tab, and go and show some fanfic writers some love. They all do a wonderful job of writing the ship, and they deserve a nice comment. I love you all, and thank you for all you've allowed me to do for this fandom.